Hello and welcome to Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. I am Colred. Thank you for joining me. In this video, I am going to be covering the Ice Golem Turn Attack Tournament. Now, this is another Turn Attack Tournament for the Halloween Titan event. It is faction specific. This time, the faction is the Undead Hordes. So this is the fourth of the dungeons to get this treatment for Halloween. And so this is my fourth video like this in just the past week. However, I think it's important that everybody know what is going on with these turn attack tournaments and with how to build a faction specific dungeon team, because it looks like that format is going to stay true throughout this Halloween Titan event. If you look down here, you can see there is a Fire Knight turn attack tournament coming back around. So the Fire Knight was the first dungeon to have a turn attack tournament that was faction specific. And now it looks like we're going to have another one. But in this case, instead of one specific faction, it looks like we are getting all of the Corrupted Alliance factions. So the Dark Elves, the Demon Spawn, the Undead Hordes, and the Knights Revenant are all going to be available for this Fire Knight Turn Attack tournament. So everything that we've done up to this point in these Turn Attack videos will be useful here. But hopefully with 4 factions to choose from, you'll be able to farm a much higher stage, so that your drops will be a little bit more worthwhile, and maybe you can get points a little bit more quickly for these tournaments. We'll have to see if they change the point totals. We don't know what's going to happen with that. But I expect now that we're going to get a Spider Turn Attack tournament next, and hopefully it's either going to be these 4 factions, which they're the Halloween factions, so I think it's probably going to be these 4 factions, or potentially what they could do is give us one of the other alliances. I think that's less likely, but it could happen. But for this video, we're just going to handle this tournament first, the Ice Golem Turn Attack tournament. And again, the faction is the Undead Hordes. So if you've missed some of my previous videos on how to build a turn attack team, or if you just want some help with the Undead Hordes and choosing some good champions, stick around. Okay, so here we are in the Undead Hordes index. And just like in my previous videos, I'm going to outline some champions that I think are useful at the uncommon, rare, and epic rarity. One thing to remember about the Ice Golem fight is that when you push the Ice Golem past certain HP thresholds, he does an extra nuke. This is in addition to his regular turn. If his minions are alive during that extra nuke, he's going to hit very hard. So you want to make sure to take out the minions first, and then you can hit the boss, and then he's going to respawn those minions, and you'll have to kill them again. Now, there are a couple of debuffs you need to worry about in this fight. The big ones are 1, a heal reduction, and then 2, a freeze. So if you have some way to handle those debuffs, that's going to be helpful. Sustain is good. Turn meter control is good if you want to reduce the number of turns that the boss gets. But slow and steady tends to win the race here, and I would say you want to err on the side of caution. Don't go for big damage abilities. You don't need a weaken. You don't need a decreased defense. You'd rather have a decreased attack to make sure that that nuke that the boss uses isn't going to wipe out your team. So think tanky, think sustain, think revives, think cleanses and block debuffs, and whatever damage you bring is going to be fine. You do have to get through the waves to get to the boss. You do have to handle the minions, but it's not a race. This fight is not a race. All right, so out of the uncommons here, I think there's only one really worth mentioning. They're all okay, and you could use most of them, but I think Dampier is actually probably the best of the lot for this fight. And it's primarily because of her A2. Her A2 is an AoE that heals her by 20% of the damage inflicted. So this is going to help you clear the waves a little bit more quickly. It's going to help you deal with the minions in the boss fight. And then because she has some heals in this ability, she's going to be a little bit easier to self-sustain. In addition, her defensive stats aren't bad for an attack-based champion, but her HP is very low, so just be aware of that. Now, amongst the rares in this faction, I think there are several very good champions you could use here. I'm just going to highlight a few. If you've already built out Frozen Banshee or you're building her out for Clan Boss, then she's a great champion to have. She doesn't do a ton of direct damage, but she does enough to help clear waves and the minions. And then her poisons are going to help do work on the boss. But so she's a good damage dealer that doesn't hit too hard and still does good work. So that's what you need for this fight. I think Grinner here is a good support to bring in. He is the rare reviver in the faction. So you get this single target revive, places a shield buff on the revived champion. So this is pretty good. In addition, he's got an AoE that strips buffs. We don't care about the strips strip buffs, but AoEs are good to help clear those waves. You do want to be aware that his A1 has a chance of placing increased attack, so when that increased attack goes up, you may want to consider if you want to hit the boss with that increased attack buff on your champions or not. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. And then his base speed and base defense here are very good. His base speed is very fast, so this guy is going to be available for you as a reviver and that little bit of extra AoE damage. So build him fast, build him tanky. Maybe put him in a shield set if you wanted to get a little bit of extra survivability for your team. And he should do good work for you. Okay, after Grinner, I'm going to call out Doomscreech. I think Doomscreech is one of the best rares in this faction and probably one of the best rares in the game. Maybe top 15 or 20 rares in the game. He's got this A2, which fills the turn meter of all allies by 30% and places an increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown if it's booked. This is one of the few rares that we're going to talk about today where I actually feel like you could take this guy to 6 stars if you wanted. He does some work in some clan boss speed tunes, and he's definitely good for arena if you need an increased defense buff and turn meter fill for arena for a defensive-based nuker. He's void affinity, so he's not going to take extra damage anywhere. This is a very good champion. You don't need to build him to 6 stars, but if you have him, he's really good for this fight. So you can consider at least taking him up to level 40. He's also got an AoE on his A3, and he's got a good HP pool, so this is another champion you could consider putting in a shield set. We're going to call out 2 more Void rares. We did just have a 2 times Void Shard event, so maybe some of you have these Void rares and haven't gotten rid of them yet. One is Stitched Beast, and he's primarily useful for this A3, which has a 100% chance of decreasing the turn meter of the target by 100% on a 4-turn cooldown. He is relatively squishy, so you need to make sure that you can get him to the boss, but then he's going to make sure that the boss takes fewer turns. He does have a weaken, so beware of that. Again, if you want the weaken on the boss, that's great. Maybe you want to put the weaken on the minions to help kill them more easily. So you can turn off this A2 if you don't like it, if you're worried about that weaken getting you in trouble. And then his A1 is a double hitter. So this is a decent champion to build out primarily for that A3. He doesn't hit really hard, but he'll do a bit of damage as an attack-based champion. And then finally, I'm saving the best for last, and that is Seducer here. Now, I don't use Seducer pretty much anywhere in the game, but he's perfectly suited for this particular turn attack tournament. He is defense-based. You can see on his A1 here, he has a chance of placing asleep. That's not really going to play, maybe a little bit in the waves, but he is defense-based, so the tankier you build him, the harder he's going to hit. He's got okay HP and very good defense. His speed is also average, so it's not slow. His A2 has an AoE that has a 100% chance of placing decrease attack debuff for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. This is the lesser decrease attack, but it's highly reliable. He is void affinity, he won't weak hit, and so this can be a very good skill both for the waves and for the bosses. Finally, he places an increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns and a block debuffs on all allies for 2 turns on a 4-turn cooldown. Both of these buffs will play. They'll help prevent you from taking too much damage and also help prevent you from taking the decrease healing or the freeze debuff. This last skill is only available when Temptress is on the same team. Temptress is also a rare in this faction. You could use them together. I don't think she's particularly useful here. She's not bad. And this skill isn't necessarily a bad skill either, but you don't need it. So if you don't have Temptress, Seducer is still very good for this fight. In addition, he has this ally HP in all battles aura by 25%. So if you need a little additional survivability, this is a pretty good aura for you to have. Okay, now let's take a look at the epics. Now the epics in this faction, there are a lot of really, really good epics in this faction. Just in the first row alone, Gorgorab, Seeker, Dark Athel, Dark Elhane, Husk, like there are a whole bunch of champions that are very solid. Seeker is absolutely fantastic. One of the most valuable all-around epics in the game with that turn meter fill and extra turn mechanic that he has. So any of those champions would be good. Dark Athel and Dark Elhane, you both get as free log-in champions, I think at 90 days and 120 days, something like that. Again, one thing you have to worry about with attack-based nukers is if you're going to nuke the boss too hard at the wrong time and potentially get yourself into trouble. But I'm actually going to call out 3 other champions here who I think have particular value in this fight. The first is Mausoleum Mage, and he may in fact be the perfect champion in the Undead Hordes to take on the Ice Golem. His A1 has a chance of landing at decreased speed. That's very good. Fewer turns for the boss is excellent. Fewer turns for the big minions is also excellent. The A2 places an increased crit rate buff and increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns. And it also places a block debuffs buff on all allies for 1 turn on a 3-turn cooldown. The increased defense and block debuffs are both excellent buffs for you to have. Increased crit rate is nice, but chances are you don't really care about your crit rate in this particular fight. And then finally, you have a full team cleanse that also heals all allies by 10% of Mausoleum Mage's max HP. He's got a decent HP pool at 19.5k, so you're going to get a decent chunky heal out of this. It's only 10%. It's not huge, and it is on a 4-turn cooldown, but any additional sustain is going to be helpful. This will also heal by 10% more if 1 or more debuffs are removed from an ally, and then fills each ally's turn meter by 15% if 2 or more debuffs are removed. So having a cleanse plus a block debuffs on 1 champion is extremely useful against Ice Golem. And again, Mausoleum Mage has a pretty good HP pool, so you consider putting him in a shield set or a bolster set if you want to add some survivability to your team. The next one here that I'm going to call out in the epic rarity is Vogoth. Vogoth just is good for sustain in general. He does have an AoE that has a chance of provoking, so it's a pretty high chance. It'd be 75% chance when booked, and he is worth taking up to 6 stars. He's a good champion to take into Baumel, so if you're worried about Baumel in Doom Tower in the future, that's not this current rotation, but in a month we'll have Baumel again. Also, an AoE provoke is good against Hydra, so an AoE provoke is always a good skill to have. And then we also have this passive here that whenever this champion is attacked, heals all allies by 50% of the damage received. This is only 25% of the damage received from boss attacks. But basically, if you survive the boss attack, you're going to get 25% of that damage back as health right away. And that's one of the things that makes Vogoth great. If Vogoth is hit by an AoE, I'm not sure if the minions do AoEs or if they're only single target hits. But if you got hit by a minion's AoE, then this would be a 50% heal. Finally, Vogoth also has a chance of placing Leech, which is just going to give you more opportunities for sustain for your team. Good HP, good defense, a little bit slow, but that's fine because he does most of his work when he's hit, not when he's attacking. But if you want to get him fast enough to help you with the waves with those AoE provokes, that's a good goal. Make sure you have enough accuracy to land those provokes. And then finally, I'm going to call out Balthus here. Now, this is not a champion that I would use in a lot of places, but he has a very good A1 for this, which is a 40% chance when booked of placing a decrease attack debuff for 1 turn. Even if it's unbooked, 30% chance on an A1 is pretty nice. He hits decently hard. He is a defensive-based champion. So again, if we're going tanky, he fits the bill. Pretty good HP, pretty good defense, decent speed. Just need to get enough accuracy on him to land this decrease attack, and then make sure he gets enough turns, has enough speed, so that he can keep this up as close to 100% of the time as possible. He does have an AoE on his A2, which decreases crit rate. That's not a waste entirely. The decreased crit rate isn't. It hits decently hard. And then his A3 has a chance to provoke, and again, heals this champion, so a little bit of self-sustain. He also has a reflect damage on his passive. And so that's just a little way to get some extra damage out there. So again, build him tanky, build him fast, build him accurate. You could put him in a shield set, or you could put him in a regen set. Could put him in any set, basically. He's not really your tank, but if you don't have anybody with a better HP pool, you could use Balthus as your shield champion. Okay, so now we actually have to build out our team. Now, I am on my Lobby account, so this is about 62 days in, 63 days in, something like that. And I'm going to try to build a team today for this turn attack tournament. Now, the likelihood is that my faction crypt team is going to be my faction specific team for this tournament. So I'm going to have to take a look and see. I don't even know if I have more than 5 champions in this faction. So we're going to go up here to the filter. We're going to include our master vault and reserve vault, go down to faction, hit Undead Hordes, and see what we've got. So in fact, it looks like I have exactly 6 champions, one of which is a fusion champion. That is Arbalester here. And you can see she's unbuilt. So she is not part of my faction crypts team. My faction crypt team is in fact Grinner. He is in a shield set. This is my reviver. I have Balthus Droglord, who isn't really built very well. You can see his gear is mostly unbuilt, and I don't even have a ring on him. But he does have 110 accuracy, which should be enough for a few levels of the Ice Golem. I have Defiled Sinner here. Again, not built super well, but has some sustain with the Lifesteal set. We've got another Lifesteal set here on Doomscreech. And then finally, we've got Frozen Banshee, who's actually built extremely well because she is my clan boss damage dealer. So she's going to be doing most of the work for this team, but everybody else is going to have to pitch in as well. I do think that if you are struggling for sustain, if you don't have a dedicated support like I don't on this team, I mean, I have Grinner, right? But he's a reviver. He's not really a sustain-based champion. So if you don't have a sustain champion, if you don't have a healer champion or a shield champion, bring in that shield set, bring in a revive, and bring in some lifesteal sets or regeneration sets to keep your team healthy. All right, so now I'm going to jump over to the dungeon and we're going to see what we can do there. Okay, here we are at the Ice Golem's Peak. Now, one thing that's really nice about this particular style of tournament for the Ice Golem's Peak is that stage 4 and stage 8 and stage 12 are all void affinity, right? As would be stage 16, which matters less. But with turn attack tournaments, we often talk about trying to take on the lowest stage for that level of energy, right? So for 14 energy, stage 12 is going to have the boss will have the fewest stats. The waves will have the fewest stats. They'll be easiest to clear out. Because this is turn attack, we want the fewest turns possible. Now, the nice thing about having a void affinity as the lowest stage in that energy tier is that you don't have to worry about the affinities of the champions you bring in if you're going to farm one of these. You can just bring any affinity. You're never going to weak hit. You're never going to take extra damage. And so it can be really consistent here and easy to build a team for. The downside to having these stages be void affinity is that you cannot build a strong affinity team, right? If you want to build a strong affinity team, you have to go up at least one stage. So you would have to go up against the Spirit Affinity and try to build a Magic Affinity team to get extra damage out there and potentially clear this faster. So if you have a lot of Magic Affinity champions in this faction and the Undead Hordes, consider taking on stage 13 instead of stage 12, or stage 9 instead of stage 8, or even stage 5 instead of stage 4. But if you just have a mixed bag of champions, this one's going to be a little bit easier because of the void affinity at those points. So I'm going to try stage 4 first. I don't know how well my team's going to do. I suspect with a level 60 Frozen Banshee, I should be able to crush this stage no problem. I should probably be able to do stage 8 as well. But I'm not likely to go much higher than that. So let's just start with stage 4 and see how we do. Okay, I put together my team. You can see it is in fact my faction Cribs team. And I put Frozen Banshee in the lead so I get extra accuracy. She's the only aura that actually works in this dungeon, as all of the other auras are for like faction crypts or arena. So let's fire this up and see how this goes. I suspect that Frozen Banshee is just going to crush everybody. And it looks like we have plenty of damage here, so we should not have trouble getting through the waves. The waves for this dungeon can be tricky, but it looks like we're even one-shotting the minions often. So, yep, we're going to crush this one. Again, that shield set's going to do a little work here. You can see we did get frozen. We don't have a cleanse on this team. We don't have a block debuffs buff. There's also a decreased accuracy here, which is not inconsiderable, but I forgot to mention before, because that can affect your debuffers. But no trouble killing the boss there. We got 14 points on a 27 turn result. We'll sell these gloves. So not a ton of points, not as good as we've done in some of the other tournaments, but not awful. We could certainly farm our tournament here at stage 4 if we needed to. And again, we're doing this with basically all 40s and a 30 with 160 here. But even if we didn't have Frozen Banshee at 60, if she were at 40, I suspect it wouldn't take more than maybe 3 or 4 extra turns to clear this stage. So as long as you can get together some 40s, remember that's typically our goal for newer accounts. If you just want to get into these tournaments and actually do some work and collect those Halloween points for the Sun Wukong souls, all you need to do is be able to farm consistently and then put your time and energy into it. So to do that, we typically say, get this to level 40 if you can, get your rares up to level 40 if you can. But as you can see, if you have 1 or 2 30s lying around, you can still farm at least stage 4, maybe a little bit higher. All right, now we're going to step up to stage 8 here, and we're going to take on this stage and see how we do. Looks like the damage is still pretty good. We're clearing waves just fine. Frozen Banshee is still hitting pretty hard. I suspect this is going to be a little bit slower, maybe a few more turns. Well, we'll see what the points look like at the end. Yeah, definitely the minions are taking less damage, but the boss isn't hitting so hard that it's scary. Definitely hitting harder, though. A little bit of sustain on this team could go a long way. Unfortunately, we just don't have that right now. It looks like Grinner may die, and he is our reviver. So having my reviver as my weakest champion, or at least, my lowest level champion, is probably not a great idea here. But so far at these low levels, I don't really need a reviver, it doesn't look like. But yeah, there goes Grinner. So it's a good thing I don't need a reviver because I don't have one. And there we go, stage 8. 51 turns, looks like 15 points is 1 point better for me. So if I could do this consistently, stage 8 would give me better drops, probably more chances of a usable drop for my Lobby account, plus 1 better point than stage 4. Now that point does cost me 2 additional energy. So for efficiency's sake, if you wanted to farm stage 4, that would still be worthwhile. But if you wanted a better chance at good drops here, you could come up a little bit higher, spend a little bit more energy per run, and get drops in addition to points. And I think that's it for me in terms of progression here on the Ice Golem's Peak. I don't think it makes a lot of sense to try stage 9, 10, or 11. So if I'm going to farm this tournament, I'm probably going to do it at stage 8 on this account. As far as the gear is concerned from this dungeon, you're not as worried about the gear here. So it almost doesn't matter if you're farming a low stage because there are very few sets that you actually care about here. Probably the best one that you're worried about is Cursed, and that is primarily for Hydra Clan Boss. It's a really good set for Hydra Clan Boss, but you're going to want a high tier set there, at least 5 stars, if not 6 stars. So if you're going at one of these low stages, you don't really have to worry about holding on to your cursed pieces. There's some other sets like Retaliation and Reflex and Provoke that all get some usage, so you could get a couple of good pieces there. But compared to the Fire Knight or the Spider's Den, like this is not the dungeon that you really need to worry about the drops for. So I think in terms of the Halloween event, if you're going to do one of these tournaments just for the points and not worry about the drops, this is the one to focus on. Just a quick reminder, I live stream every Tuesday and Saturday. Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern time, I do my Takeover Tuesdays. So if you're interested in a free takeover, that's the place to be. And then on Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern time, my editor Sun and I take our noob versus pro accounts out for a spin. We talk to our viewers. We have a bunch of fun. It's a pretty cool time, so come join us. All right, that is it for me. If you have any questions, don't forget to put them in the comments below. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and consider joining our Discord community. Thanks so much for watching. I've been Colred, and I will see you in another video soon.